Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is, of course, the Telemanca Review. It's Tuesday, the 24th of March, 2026, 8:49 a.m. I was up nice and early today. Yeah, to be honest with you, I haven't been podcasting because I just haven't, really had anything to say. I mean, I don't know what to say when we're in war. I mean, everything that I was talking about was, leading up to this. And I don't really know how to speak about it. I do and I don't. Um, so that's my dilemma. Anyways, it's been long enough, and I just thought I'd um, get a podcast done today. So, one of the things that I want to talk about today is the absolute proof of concept that we're witnessing in the world now. And a proof of concept is going from theory to practice in something. So you have a theory that something works, and then you try it and it actually works. And so we call that proof of concept. So what we're living through now is proof of concept that there has always been an Israeli agenda to dominate this region of the world, the Middle East, or wherever they end up. And that's what's going on now, and that can't be done without Iran. And I think that this is the most we've bitten off in the last, I don't know, 23 years or so, 24, 23 years since we went into Iran, which was, I don't think anybody speaks fondly about now, right? Everybody has a negative opinion of it. I mean, some people would have said that this was almost inevitable, what was coming with Iran. I honestly thought they'd never get around to doing it and that it was just talk. And the advancement of the agenda suggests to me a certain immediacy in their timing now, meaning that they don't have the time they used to have to get these things done. And pressing time in this instance would mean something within the calculations or the calculus of their reality, the Jewish reality. And this would bring in astrology, gematria, and all the sort of arcane arts of prediction that they have. Whether they still work or not, I don't know, because everything's changing now. And it's changing to what I would call um, a model um, that it has to be entirely recalibrated. Okay, so this is one of the things that happens down here. There are these, let's call them vibrational recalibrations on the earth. And they set about what the normal state of consciousness can encompass and what will easily come into consciousness and what will not easily come into consciousness. So think of it this way. When you journey with consciousness, which sometimes happens in meditation, one does not sit down with the direct intent of journeying somewhere in a meditation. But if the perception, the soul is taken there, and then you see what's there and you come back. I mean, if it happens to me, I just consider it to be providential, just part of the outcome of that particular sitting on that particular day. And God wanted me to know something, God, universe, being, journey, whatever you want, whatever word you want to put on it. I don't want to offend anybody with language, and I know that God is an offensive word for some people, especially the way it's being used now. So you've got the Shia Iranian Muslim definition of God. You've got the very dark Kabbalistic Israeli definition of God. And I mean, sometimes it seems absurd to me to even use the word God because those two groups of people are using it in the same way. So I don't know how much I have in me right now. So, what happens, the podcast usually pivots off of a dramatic tension. And the dramatic tension is a high ideal against the reality of how we're living the ideal. And this creates a lot of my podcasts, believe it or not. So here's the marker we set for ourselves. Here's what we're actually doing. And these create all of the sort of comic and satirical and dark observations on the Talamanca Review, whether it be the Catamite Parade or what have you. And I just find that when it comes to bloodletting and killing people, which is where we're at now, I don't even want to look for that dramatic tension to do a podcast. I honestly, and I say this with my full heart, I honestly want every Iranian, every Israeli, every American, every Syrian, every Lebanese to be secure and protected by what I consider to be the same God that secures and protects my existence. I don't wish harm upon anybody. It just amazes me how we get ourselves into these positions. It just seems absurd, you know? That's the way it seems to me. And you can say I'm naive, and probably I am. It's funny for me to speak this way after all the podcasts I've done, like Mean Streets and stuff like that, talking about growing up and, all this mischief and mayhem I got into as a teenager. Now at the age of 59, my tolerance for reckless violence is almost non-existent. It's an act of violence to harvest an animal to eat, and I accept that. That's part of the violence of my being. But this violence against human beings, I just don't have a stomach for it. I I I love people too much. I just love human beings. I think we're the most amazing creation ever. Ever. I think we're the greatest third dimensional construction and opportunity in the universe. And the opportunity for consciousness in a human incarnation is, I think, the greatest in the universe. And that's why there's so many distractions down here. They don't want us becoming fully human. And so when I see the war and the bloodshed and everything start again, it's just a little depressing for me. Now, if you think my life's bad, let's take a look at what some of people have to go through as they navigate this gauntlet of what I'll call Jewish persecution if you're an American figure who turns upon them. Okay, so let's take a look at a little bit of that.
I travel so much that I see it. There's not a single Western city that's thriving, and they're all degrading in exactly the same way.
Is a lot of it just a moral decay, or is it actually true from everything?
It's a lot of things, but it's
Yeah.
self-hatred. Every city,
Crazy.
every European city, every American city, it's just what people lose their will to live, their will to pass on their culture, their values, their religion to their children, their will to have children. It's all gone. I mean, it's not gone with everybody, but I mean, in the cities, you really see it. It's like the people who built this are long gone, and their
Right.
descendants have fled, and they don't care enough to keep it going. There's just a lack of self-respect
Mhm.
that is disgusting to me, and I have contempt for it. I don't. It doesn't bother me to be hated. What really bothers me is when people hate themselves. If you hate
That's well
if
put.
you hate yourself,
Yeah,
how are you going to treat me?
that's correct.
Oh man, I don't like it. So you and you, I notice it because I travel outside the Western world, the white world. I'll just be honest, the white world. I
Right.
travel a lot in the Middle East. It's amazing. It's
Mhm.
amazing. I'm not
Mhm.
Muslim, obviously. In fact, I'm like a Christian, flat out Christian. And my ancestors are from Europe.
Mhm.
And so I have nothing in common on that level with the Gulf. But you go to the Gulf and it's incredible to be in a place that has pride in itself, that believes
Correct.
in its religion and culture, that thinks we're onto something. And this is great. Look at what we're doing. We're really proud of this. Those people are happy. They're welcoming of others. They're tolerant of diversity. Like we always talk
Right.
about tolerant of diversity. There's none of that here. Are you kidding? All the whites, we love black people. Then
No,
they run and
no,
move
they
to Bozeman because there are no black people.
Absolutely. Send
It's-
their kid to the.
They
to the-
hate diversity.
they hate it.
And our version of it isn't working at all.
No,
Like
it
at
don't.
all. So, but you go to a country like Japan or the Emirates or Qatar or Saudi Arabia, and you see that when people are self-confident, when they're really pleased with what they're doing and they believe that their system is the right system, that self-confidence results in a kind of welcoming attitude.
Mhm.
So you'll be sitting at dinner in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and you'll say, I'm really kind of pro Jesus, like I'm a Christian. They'll be like, oh, that's so great.
And they don't have the same.
Well, they mean it.
And
Oh,
they don't have the same belief.
No, they're
in some cases.
Muslims.
They're
It's-
Muslims.
It's a country
yeah.
governed by Sharia law.
Right.
And they're like, that's great.
Good for you. Yeah.
It's great. And you notice like in ISIS or Al Qaeda or like the Muslim extremists, they're all from like collapsed, pathetic societies dominated by colonial powers. They've been degraded,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why they're so angry.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So there's something about being degraded that turns you into a violent nutcase extremist. You're seeing a lot of violent nutcase extremists in our country. Not surprising because the country's being degraded.
Correct.
So in a country with self-confidence, people are tolerant and open-minded and happy. And in a country where people are told to hate themselves, they start to hate others. Duh. This is all
Yeah.
like very obvious, but I only know that because I've traveled a lot.
Mhm.
And I am naturally open-minded.
Mhm.
Like just because you don't do it my way doesn't mean it's bad. Like I really feel that way. It's where they're into things that I'm not into, like, I don't know, polygamy or Islam. And I can sort of look at it and be like, no one's forcing this on me. I'm not mad at you for being a polygamist. I think it's really hard.
Yeah.
But whatever, leaving that aside, but I can go to a place like that and I don't feel like I need to judge everybody on their local customs. I just don't feel that need. But in the process of doing that, like you get perspective on your own society. And the core problem is a loss of faith in our people, in our values, in our religion. Just don't believe anything. I don't care what you tell me. Like, I'm noticing that New York City has people shitting on the sidewalk or having sex in
Yes.
ATM vestibules, and people are dying of drug ODs on the street in their carjackings. You're telling me it's thriving. I was just there. It's not.
It's
Like,
not
I don't care
thriving.
what stats you throw them. Well, according to the American Academy of Bullshit, it's actually the best it's ever been. Really? I was there
Yeah.
last week. It's not. All I'm saying is let's treat the people who run the banks, the people who are getting rich from usury, like the criminals they are, and make them suffer, because that's totally fair. If you exploit and destroy people, you're not a good person, and we should just say that. And I think we should start by getting collective action. Everybody who's deep in credit card debt, I don't care what your race, would be actually a way to unify the country. We're just going to have this month, we're all getting together, and we're not going to pay our credit card bill.
That
What do you
would be
think of that,
amazing.
bitch? What are you
That
going to
would
do
be
about
amazing.
it? But your average person can't do that. So why don't we all get together and do that? You know what would happen if we did that? I'd be assassinated immediately just for saying that.
5
So that was a Laura Loomer post on X, and she had a very sarcastic comment. I'm not sure if you were able to read it at the bottom there, but she was just saying that Tucker Carlson now thinks that there's not a livable city in the West, and that the societies in the Gulf Coast countries, GCC, are actually better than us now. And Laura Loomer has an issue with this. Well, clearly Tucker is right. I mean, there's so many places in the world you can go now that are better than the West, and the West is a sliding scale itself. I'd say that the United States is still better than Canada. And I'm sorry to the Canadians, who listen to the Talamanca Review, as I'm constantly using Canada as my political, social, and economic pinata, just beating the shit out of it with a stick. But I honestly feel that it deserves it, and there's a lot of reasons this is so. There's a lot of questions that any reasonable person should be asking about the West right now and everything that's been happening. Now, as the focus has changed and become more specific in our timeline. So when you go to war, one of the things it does is it contracts focus, okay? You don't look at the world through a wide lens anymore. Everything just gets collapsed in into the daily calamity of living through war and the possible risks and death to friends and family and things like this. And it's a very unpleasant contraction of consciousness. And I'm not going to have anything to do with it. I'm going to stay with the bigger picture. And this is a conscious decision, by the way, okay? Because whether you realize it or not, war is a trip line. Okay, so war is a trip line. Once you hit that trip line, there's no going back. You've set in motion a series of events, like those events that protect an artifact in an Indiana Jones movie, with Harrison Ford. He tips the weight and all of a sudden a bunch of levers go and then he's got to escape a giant boulder. War is a trip line. It's a linguistic trip line because you can't speak after the commencement of war the same way you were speaking before the war began. Now, I've always said throughout my journey as a podcaster and a writer, number one, I've always sometimes in a direct, but usually in an indirect way, I've always, since 2020, 2019 with the Stardust Ranch, I've always apologized for the darkness of my work. I cannot stress enough how self-conscious I was of it in 2020, especially when The Light of Darkness published. And I literally sat for days, even after the 7 months of all day, every day, 7 days a week working on this book, I sat for 2 or 3 days wondering whether I was really going to put it up on Amazon. And part of me thought that I had put things on paper that were too dark and that it was a sin, if you will, that these things should not be put to paper, and that the panic I would cause people and the horror I would cause people might not be validated, might not be justified, especially if the darkness we were living within was never fully revealed, was never fully looked at, where you could look at it and say, I'm not crazy, I'm not imagining this has really happened. And for those of you who've been following this information stream, in a manner similar to me, so probably about the real darkness of it and the depravity of consciousness manipulation and human degradation hit me around 2012, 2013, 2012, I'd say, maybe 2011, when I started to learn about the Super Soldier program. And I didn't have any Super Soldier friends back then. I didn't have anyone to talk to about these things. And as a general rule, when you want to understand something, go to the primary source, go to where it is strongest and most experiential. So a primary source is the living vibration of a truth. It's a consciousness, okay? So it's somebody who lived through something and everything everything about them is a testament to what you want to know about. Okay? Even when they're not speaking, even when they're not directly answering questions, even the way they eat a plate of food, the way they go about living their lives, everything is a tell. Everything is telling you something. And because they've gone through all of this stuff, this unbelievable stuff that we put human beings through to create what were called in the colloquial super soldiers. Now, what the program was really it was a human enhancement program, but when you say super soldier, most people kind of think Jason Bourne or something like that, but that's not my experience, although there's physical capabilities baked into the programming, right? And excessive strength and things like this. And this is due to all of the dimensional work. Okay? I mean, this is quite frankly why a lot of people get attracted to demons. Because when your consciousness circumscribes a demon, you can access this superhuman strength. This is a known thing too. So the super soldier becomes in a sense the living testament of what's trying to be said. And what I noticed when I met them was, yeah, all of the abilities are there. All of these incredible psychic abilities, but at the core of their being, these are all deeply wounded people who cannot get themselves out of what I would call adolescent consciousness. The super soldier consciousness, as it expresses itself in human personality, stays at a very adolescent state. Okay? So most of the super soldiers I've met, they just like to game all day. Game, and they do a lot of generally they do a lot of drugs. If they come off the drugs, then they have to go through a whole gauntlet of internal experiences that are extremely uncomfortable. I don't know how I ended up on this topic, starting to talk about super soldiers and such. Yeah, so we are in the West going through a great turning now. And the question becomes, where do we go from here? Okay? Where do we go from here? How do we become a society again? How do we become a normal culture again when measured against all of our transgressions? And make no mistake about it, most of the programs um, in the intelligence world, in the black book world, in the deep state world too, use the language of Trump and his administration and those in alignment with it. This this dark world has done so much damage to the collective consciousness. It's asked us to bear so much ugliness. What we've done to other people, and that can't be avoided anymore. Okay? And that's a difficult thing for a lot of people to talk about right there, you know? And I'm not going all colonial or anything like that. I'm not going all woke. Um, but I do think that attacking countries and taking their stuff is not the example we want to be showing the world right now. Okay? It's just not a good example. Not when we're formally being criticized of these things in academia and in other circles in the media. The West has had the inescapable reputation as an oppressive colonial force. It started in the early 90s. I was experiencing it a little bit while I was getting my degree from 88 to 92. And it was already creeping in, the DEI, everything. You could see it all back then, and then when we graduated and there was a hiring meet and greet at the journalism school at the university, we found out that the newspapers and the broadcasters had come in with race and gender mandates. They weren't even looking at Marx per se. They had a race and a gender mandate. So this would be CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, Toronto Star, the newspaper, CTV, another national broadcast, private sector national broadcasting network in Canada. But it was all DEI. And so I've been living this my whole life, like the evil white man thing. And I would also point out that I'm the person who coined the phrase about 5 years ago that there are two options before the human race, and one is the synagogue, which is no representative of Noahide law, and the other is the gulag, which is representative of penalization and incarceration until you're literally worked to death in a communist or militaristic socialistic system. And I see no other options being presented to the West at this time in history. No other options whatsoever. It's this way or no way. All right, now let's get back to, because I find some of the public figures, and I want to talk about a little bit about this today, the public figures who've taken a stand against Israel, because I don't know at this point yet whether this is an op or not. I mean, part of me, my rational self that's been politically aware since I was 14 years old, politically aware meaning that you live within the reality of how the world works. And so for those of you who haven't read The Devil in Us, my political awakening was watching TV one time when I was about 14, 6 o'clock news. And this would have been about 1978. And there's some dude walking across a tarmac in the Philippines. And he's got a bunch of people around him and a bunch of cameras and microphones following him. Clearly an important person. And I'm watching the news, and I haven't gotten a university degree. I haven't started reading newspapers every day. I don't have a clue what's going on. And that's an important thing to realize as well, right? Is that there's a lot of people who don't have a clue what's going on. They just believe the information sources in their societies, and they don't have any independent research. They have absolutely no idea that their government lies to them to this level, and they wouldn't know what to do if they were made aware of it. They would not know what to do. And anyways, this dude's walking across the tarmac, and the old man gets home from work. He took a bus to work. From the east end of Ottawa into downtown Ottawa. And then he would come home every night. He'd be home around 5:30, maybe a quarter to 6. And he'd come into the house and the old man was home, right? And he'd walk in and greet everybody. And he just glanced at the TV for a sec. And he said, "You see that guy there?" I said, "The guy with all the media around him?" My dad goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Yeah, what about him?" My dad said, "Well, he'll be dead in a week." And I went, "He's got cancer?" And my dad says, "No, the CIA's not done with Marcos yet, the leader of the Philippines." Like, like literally to the day. And I'm not saying my dad knew it, that he was in a meeting and he was told this, but he'd been around diplomacy and economics long enough, traveling the world in his function in his job, that he knew how the world worked. He knew the world that Perkins was describing in Economic Hitmen, before Perkins published Economic Hitmen, before it was common knowledge that this is what the West did. So sure enough, a week later, the guy and I don't know why I'm even laughing, but when I think about it, I think about it as like a kind of initiatic experience in my youth at 14, where my father just instantly took me from a child to an adult in how I view the world. They're going to kill that guy. Boom. 7 days later, bullet in the head. The old man comes home the day it happens. He goes, "I told you," just like that. "Told you." And then I just asked him a few questions like, is it all like that? Like, does the whole world work this way? He goes, yeah, pretty much. And that was my old man. Like, he did not sugarcoat anything, right? So that was my political awakening, and I'm grateful for it. And then once you're looking at the world through the correct lens, and unfortunately, folks, it's a cynical lens, okay? I remember when I got my journalism degree, I had a research professor. He taught a course simply called Research, How to Research. And this guy, and this was pre-internet, right? This was all land registries, like how to find in where in a city do you find information? That was the basis of his course. And it was a wonderful course, taught me so much, taught me how to research, taught me all about the public archives and where to find information, registrations, corporate registrations, all of these sorts of things, right? And I remember day one of his class in first semester, first year of university, first week, we walk into this research class, and there's this professor there. And his first question is, can anybody tell me the difference between a cynic and an optimist? And we're all just sitting there, right? Late teens. Some of us are a bit older. I'm early 20s. I took a few years off between high school and university. And everybody's sitting there and we don't know. And he just goes, the cynic is better informed. So on this plane of existence, the cynical answer is 9 times out of 10, it's the right answer. And I know this is uncomfortable for people to grapple with because we're fed all this positive thinking bullshit and manifest your reality, the secret bullshit, and all this nonsense that's crept into our society that is supposed to keep a cocaine like state of vigilance in a person without using cocaine. So, from that harnessed mindset, you become rich. This has been the American path now for some time. You can see right in the slogan of Make America Great Again that something has gone wrong, right? So I don't think that we're going to make it out of this unless the real cynical points are grasped. Unless the political candidate running against Marcos in 1978 shot in the head on a airport tarmac 7 days after I was told he was going to be shot or killed within a week. That's the world we should all be living in because that's the only real world. And it's even darker than that. Once you get behind that layer, and Perkins never went that deep, to go that deep, we have to go to people like Ronald Bernard, David Steele, or whatever the Steele guys, was it David? The heavy-set bearded guy. He died, and he was an ex-CIA guy, and he gave a lot of information. But a lot of that information and the groups that formed to bring it out and curate it were also part of the system, and it was just a dilution of the true message to make sure it wouldn't get out. And now the real message is out, but it has never been formally declared. I suppose these media defectors, like Candace Owens, like Megyn Kelly, like Tucker Carlson, who all seem to be relatively uniform in their dissent against the attack on Iran, and therefore perceived as anti-Israel. And you got all these pit bulls out there, like these Israel firsters, like Laura Loomer and Mark Levin. And I mean, if there's one thing I can say about the time we're living in now, people are getting an accurate view of the Jews, how psychotic they've become, how vindictive, how bloodthirsty, how much they are about their own survival above all else's survival. They're your best friends when you're dying with them. right? Because we don't have to die with them. Their problems in the Middle East are their problems in the Middle East, right? They're your best friends when you're bleeding with them, and when they don't need you, they treat you like shit. They're the most racist, insular people on the planet. They only tolerate Gentiles to make money off of them. Let's be honest about this, okay? Now, it's not all Jews. I mean, and this has to be said, right? It's not all Jews. There's a lot of liberal Jews now. There's a lot of Jews. There's a lot of, I mean, Brett Weinstein, many Jews are speaking out now. And a lot of them are like, they're just throwing the dart. Their bullseye is my bullseye. It's Chabad Lubavitch. And Professor Jang, I never noticed this before. And I'm sorry, I haven't researched this. Maybe I will in a moment, just with you guys here. Look it up on the AI. But Professor Jang is saying that a lot of what we call Chabad Lubavitch is inherited. It was the channel or the funnel that the Sabbatean Frankists went into. And these, of course, are the inversion people, this sin as the path to God people. And I'm inclined to believe it, and that means that Chabad Lubavitch crowd is doing all the dark shit too. Okay? And I know that's hard for people to believe, but you have to understand that Judaism is an ancient blood culture. The pivot of the religion, the penultimate expression of the religion is what they say animal sacrifices, but I think human sacrifices as well. And and I think it's always been that way, right back to when Solomon built the Temple of Moloch right beside his temple. And so you've got the animal slaughter going on in the Temple of Solomon, run by the Leviticus priestcraft that do the sacrifices, and the Cohens who go into the Holy of Holies, and that's a whole other story. What the Holy of Holies is in the temple, a chamber within a chamber within a chamber. You get the idea, right? And then right beside it is the temple, and when I say right beside it, I mean sharing a wall is the Temple of Moloch, and they're doing human sacrifice. And look, let me be clear about this. I don't want to single out the Jews. I mean, we only know about the blood sacrifice in their temple because they're so smart and they document everything. They've been literate for millennia, whereas most of humanity has not. Much of humanity, many swaths of humanity to this day are still not literate. And the Jewish population's been literate, at least at the priest level, for a long, long time. And everybody did human sacrifice, right? My people did it. The Tuatha De Danann that became the Druids, they did it. And generally it was to get rid of psychopaths in the tribe, though. They could recognize psychopaths, and they would just get rid of them. So everybody did it, you know. It's just what I find hardest to understand right now, what I just can't get my head around, is how they think this is appropriate going into the age of Aquarius to resurrect a blood ritual temple with all of the spiritual growth that's been made by the human race in the last 2 or 3,000 years, right? Because blood ritual is never, ever, ever a high spiritual practice. You're dealing with low spirits. You're dealing with very, very low energies. It's a very low exchange, okay? And really, you could make the case there's no reason to do it anymore. There's no reason to do it at all. Now, I will point out that there is a legitimate spiritual economy in our multidimensional reality in which blood is an equitable form of trade. You need to understand that, okay? That's a very important thing. There is a spiritual reality we live in as all of these dimensions work together. There is a spiritual economy or a spiritual system that works between the physical and the astral, and one of its principal currencies from the physical side is blood. And then the return from the other side is favor or fortune in the outcome of circumstance. This is one of the principles of transactional magic. Transactional magic is just like hiring a hitman, except the contract is between this physical realm and an unseen realm very close to this one. And there's people there and they're living and they need things and energies to exist. And this principle, by the way, this is fascinating, okay? This principle of trade goes beyond your physical existence. Okay, it can go, not in all cases. In most economies, an economy is a sphere or a realm, an energetic sphere or realm you end up in, okay? So right now we're in the physical realm, and this physical realm has a very strict mandate and a very strict economic mandate. There are things you must do to maintain your physical body, or you will die. And those things are delimited by turnings of the sun and the moon. You can only go so many days without food. You can only go so many days without water. And you can only go so many days without sleep. Now, that strict economy of the physical body does not carry over to the other side, which is why we get to rest or relax a little bit on the other side. Even the ghosts, even the people who didn't rise that far, the only reason they can't relax on the other side is the consciousness they occupy is still driven by all the bodily desires, and they don't have a body anymore. And that's the chaos of the ghost energy that you're dealing with. And that's why they're willing to trade. And that's why they're willing to trade and do these things.
Megyn Kelly is going off on Mark Levin, and then Trump had to jump in later with a tweet. But go ahead and cut 5.
I mean, I could keep going, and I've said nothing. Truly, I mean, like one tweet here or there at most, just to like occasionally, like a pitcher at the mound, give him a brush back. Like, would you just settle down? Like, go figure out where the fight really is. And the reason he's coming for me is because I do have an audience, and he's very, very angry about that fact. Very angry about that fact. So the attacks escalate. And I don't, I don't bring them all in front of you guys. I don't bring the security threats that rise in front of you guys. It's like, trust me, it's gotten very, very ugly for me in that way. And we're dealing with that. But finally, I had enough. And I tweeted at Mark Levin this weekend something to the effect of, I'm very sorry about his micro penis, which I really enjoyed. I mean, I thankfully have never had to look at it firsthand, but you can just tell. No one's that angry and misogynistic, because there's been lots of misogyny in his tweets about me, like all the time. Who doesn't have that problem? And really, we should be feeling sorry for Mark Levin. We should be comforting him, because that's got to be really tough. You got to go out on the air and like try to act like you're a big swinging. And as you know, the only people who act like they have the big swinging are the ones that don't. So he's really revealed it to me against my wishes and consent, to be honest. But there it was for me to see, obviously. And so I called him out on it. And guess what? He didn't like his new nickname.
David, I remember Trump said you got like blood. I think she used to come in from her eyes, and everybody said, you're misogynistic, talking about a woman that way. How dare you? They went off on her, and everybody in the media defended Megyn during those debates. She just went at like really misogynist, sexist towards the guy. What if it was the reverse and Mark Levin talked about a woman that way? That's an interesting point, because nobody called her out, called micro penis Mark Levin. You want to debate policy, Megyn? I like Megyn, but that's kind of ridiculous. Give me your thoughts on that. Then this war breaking out, this civil war between what was the Trump coalition that made him win, and it's a free-for-all right now. Give me your thoughts on the Megyn.
They're both very successful people. And Mark Levin started as an attorney, as a guest, on the radio, on talk radio.
So there you can see quite clearly that much of what we would call the American social consciousness has degenerated to who's with the Jews and who's not with the Jews. And if you're paying attention, what you'll notice is that if you betray the Jews at this juncture, if you have a voice that can influence America and move it in a certain direction against the Jewish agenda, the Zionist agenda, there is vitriolic attacks for you. You heard what Megyn Kelly said. You know, you're dealing with security threats, you're dealing with death threats. I mean, I don't know how much longer it's going to take for the West to realize the real fanatics are the Jews. The real jihadists, the real religious terrorists are the Jews. Just open your eyes. I mean, you literally can't miss it now.
I want to read you something, Joe, for you to respond to here. When one of President Trump's closest advisors, who's vocally advocating for us to not go to war with Iran and for us to rethink at least our relationship with the Israelis, and then he's suddenly publicly assassinated and we're not allowed to ask any questions about it, it's a data point, you told Carlson, about the murder of our friend Charlie Kirk. It's a data point that we need to look into. What are you trying to look into there? What do you think happened there?
What I know is that there were foreign leads that we didn't get a chance to look into, that we did not thoroughly investigate. That's what I know.
Do you have any country in mind?
No, I think we need to fully investigate the potential of any foreign nexus.
So you think a foreign country may have been involved in his assassination. Does the FBI think that?
What I think is that we need to thoroughly investigate all the potentials. That's what needs to happen.
I know, but what I'm trying to find out, you're a smart guy. You're an accomplished guy. Is there something that piqued your interest that caused you to say, maybe there's something foreign and we need to look into this? I mean...
There is. I just can't get into it because it's classified and it's part of an ongoing investigation, I hope. But from my vantage point and from what I saw at the National Counterterrorism Center, that was not thoroughly looked into.
I'm not trying to be rude. Just slow down. I'm a little hard of hearing. Go ahead. What was that? I didn't hear you.
What I said was there were still potential foreign links and leads that we needed to look into. That's what I know. That's what I'm asserting.
So you're not asserting any particular country there?
No, I'm not.
So there you've got Joe Kent clearly alluding to the fact that there's much more to the Charlie Kirk death than what we've been led to believe, which is the one guy dating a tranny in Utah, which I think is a very, very thin cover story. So, I mean, and then that's Laura Loomer posting Mark Levin interviewing Joe Kent, who was gracious enough to go on his show after Kent did the Tucker Carlson interview. Now, what's being suggested here and what they're trying to set up is any communication with people like Candace Owens, Megyn Kelly, or Tucker Carlson, especially by former administration people, is going to be regarded as anti-Semitic, and they're going to make it stick. And it is just amazing to me that the average human being conditioned by this Jewish propaganda is more afraid of being called an anti-Semite than they are afraid of having the blood of innocent people on their hands because we got tricked into killing a bunch of people for Israel. And I would remind you of the fundamental truth in Mark Passio's work. He captures something very, very important in his work. He reattributes the liability of the autonomous being upon us human beings, meaning that we were given the ability to reason, we were given the ability to feel, we were given all of these qualities of discernment, and that we have to use them, and that if we don't use them or stop using them and get browbeaten into a conformist position, and that is, believe me when I tell you what is going on, okay? There is, in my estimation, no country more evil in the world today than Israel. And that includes Iran and North Korea, Cuba. Their numbers are dwindling now. The world, this agenda has been slowly changing for quite some time now. Slowly evolving, I should say. Okay? It's always the same thing, and we're at the 2-minute warning now, which is, that when the referees tell you there's 2 minutes left in a NFL game, National Football League game, So I don't know where it goes from here. I think that we just have to keep talking and telling our truth. And my truth is that this is a very sinister thing going on, that we've known about it as a plan in the background for centuries, the plan to pivot the human race into the age of Aquarius under the leadership of the Temple of Solomon, and the Sanhedrin and Chabad Lubavitch. This is the vision of the future, and it can't be denied anymore. And I'm sick and tired of these Jews coming out and peddling their lies. There's that rather rambunctious and obnoxious rabbi on YouTube from Israel, not afraid to use the word goy in its proper context and its proper accentuations, I'll tell you that much. And he's the one who said, oh, wouldn't it be just nice if during this war one of those missiles accidentally hit the Alaska Mosque? And then Tucker quoted him, and then they had another rabbi interview him as a kind of a response to Tucker Carlson. This guy, he don't understand it's always the same thing when they get really cornered, okay? It's the theology. And you can't question them because you're not Jewish and you don't understand their theology, because Judaism is not a public-facing religion. It's not looking for converts, okay? Or at least it hasn't been for most of its 3,000 years in the public record, beginning with the Temple of Solomon. I mean, if you begin with Moses, 3,500, 4,000 years. But I think the root stories, the Egyptian stories, are not true. I think that Moses was a blood-born Egyptian, and that he led a kind of Egyptian rebellion, if you will, and the beginning of what we call Judaism, beginning with Moses, who wrote the Torah, is this Egyptian magic. And magic's been here since the beginning of time. But we can't talk about it anymore because it's irrational.
Joe Kent, I'd like to go through some of this with you and give you an opportunity to respond. We got Semaphore, we got Axios, we got the New York Post, we got on and on and on, saying that you were considered a leaker. We have the White House saying it. Were you a leaker? Are you under investigation? Do you know whether you're under investigation? Let's try and clear the air right at the beginning.
Sure, Mark. Thanks for having me on. I never leaked any classified information. And the stories you're reading are stories from leakers who are leaking, I guess, maybe an investigation about me being a leaker. So I think it's just a media counter narrative. I had
so nobody has contacted you from Justice or the FBI or anything like that?
Nope.
Did you ever leak confidential?
Nope,
Let me
never
do it
leaked.
this way. Did you ever leak classified information? You said no. Did you ever leak confidential
No.
information?
Nope.
Never.
Never.
Were you
No.
cut out? Okay, you're on the record. That's perfectly fine. And that's a good thing, Joe.
So immediately when you go against the Jews, and all Joe Kent did was retire from his position as NCIS, I don't remember, National Security Advisor, National Security Advisor, like almost as high up as Tulsi Gabbard. And he retired, and the stated reason in his very public letter was there was no imminent threat from the perspective of American intelligence, which would be CIA, NSA, and all the ancillary groups that gather intelligence. There was no credible intelligence that Iran posed a threat to the United States. That's all the guy did. Now listen to the cross-examination by Mark Levin. Have you ever leaked? Have you ever given up confidential information? Like, you're not one of us. We're gonna get you. There has been a referral from the CIA to justice to have Tucker Carlson arrested for speaking to Iranian officials before the conflict. I mean, this is getting pretty wacky now. And so when you go into war, it's considered the point of all cessation of debate. That's what war is, because, I mean, when you think about it nationally, because you've gone from talking about something to shedding blood. Again, there's that blood again, the blood being spilled. It's always the blood, the blood, the blood. And so the blood of your people, the American people, have been spilled. There have been, I don't know, a dozen or so deaths of American troops already. And so there's blood. And the time for debate is finished. We're fighting now. We had this fight. We had this discussion. There's no more discussion. We're fighting now. You're either with us or you're against us. Are you with us? Will you stand with the United States? And this the Zionist definition of American is being templated now. If you're not a Zionist, you're not an American, is what Mark Levin is saying. And I don't know why we're allowing them to get away with it, but I don't think they're getting away with anything anymore. I don't think people like Mark Levin or Laura Loomer truly understand how ridiculous they look. And the fact that they can exist without death threats, like Megyn, like Tucker, is all the evidence you need. So I don't think this is a good direction. And when we look at the rest of what used to be the Western Alliance, which was Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Britain, Western Europe, basically, okay? So you've got Portugal, Italy, Scandinavian countries, Norway, Finland. They're off on their own now. Britain is not with us. Canada's not with the United States. Although Mark Carney has said a number of times that Iran was the #1 state sponsor of terrorism in the world. And look, I'm not saying Iran is really a friend of the world per se. But again, you got to go with the seven countries plan, and they didn't achieve it in their time frame. Very often the timing is off, if you'll notice. Agenda 2020, Agenda 2030. You know, we've been hearing these things since the 90s. Alan Watt was talking about it's the basis of Alan Watt's work, the essential Alan Watt. I mean, he was the most objective. He was, in his theory, he just referred to them as elites. He never got really into the Zionist debate, or whether it's the Jews or the secret society. I think the secret societies is a given. I think Alan Watt was acutely aware of that. But he just left it at that. I mean, his point was he wanted to show you the whole plan. And what amazes me is, and maybe it's the perspective of a guy who lives in an earthbag house in a rainforest, but from my perspective, I can't believe that they're actually able to make this work. I can't believe that they're actually able to get away with this, and people swallow it. And for what? I don't think they understand what's being propositioned right now. I don't think they understand what's being put in front of them right now. We are certainly witnessing something approximating the end of the Abrahamic cycle. Now, the Abrahamic system is a disposable system. Okay? You know, even though they talk about the eternity of their God and the eternity of their afterlife, Christianity is a disposable system. It's a system of living and social organization that cannot persist beyond a certain level of objectified consciousness through science and reasoning. It can't exist anymore. It boxed itself into a corner by pivoting all of its power off of time and assuming the voice of God over the age of Pisces and saying, this is what's going to happen, this is what's going to happen, this is what's going to happen. And then where it may have been legitimate in the beginning with the initial prophets, I think there was some very good stuff in Judaism. Very good teachers for the whole human race, by the way. So for me, a spiritual teacher is for the whole human race. There's no spiritual teacher comes here, no serious teacher comes here to dispense teachings to a particular culture only. A particular culture may embrace a teacher because the teacher makes them look good, right? We must be the best people in the world because we got the Jesus. They just got all these blue gods over there. We got the Jesus. We must be the important people. There's no limit to the amount of mental poisons that arise from religious thinking that is never pierced by the real presence of the divine. Okay? And maybe it's correct that you should never teach religion. Because if people are not ready for religion or ready for multidimensional consciousness and it's taught to them, there can be a very negative reaction within the rationality of their mind, their refusal to disbelieve, and the compensations in their reality and worldview they'll make, the adjustments they'll make to conform to their dogma. It's a time of truth and reconciliation like never before. There's never been a time like this.
We're talking about June.
We knew that after Midnight Hammer, it was evident that the Israelis still wanted regime change in Iran, and they were going to continue to push.
How did the Israelis get all this power over President Trump? He says to you, that's not right. Radcliffe says, that's not right. Hegseth says, that's not right. So I don't know what the vice president said to you, but why do you keep insisting on it when they keep insisting it's not true?
Because in real time over the course of the last year, we watched the Israelis through their official engagements with members of our government and the media echo chamber, which I believe you were a part of, move President Trump's red line from saying that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon to saying Iran can't have any enrichment, because President Trump and the former supreme leader of Iran agreed that Iran was not going to get a nuclear weapon. They were getting it
and you believed them.
Table.
You believe
them. I believe that 18 members of the intelligence community.
Well, apparently it wasn't 18 because the CIA director said you're wrong.
Well, the coordinated assessment that the CIA sent to the ODNI said that they were not working towards getting a nuclear bomb because the supreme leader had a prohibition on the development of nuclear weapons.
So you believed
This
his
was well
fatwa?
established.
I mean, this is kind of foolish. So they
His
put out a
fatwa- his
fatwa. The
fatwa-
guy
it
just
is-
lied
it
about
is
the
held-
hold on now, hold on.
it is
The guy
held
lied
in
about the
2004,
distance of their ballistic missiles in February. His foreign minister did.
Then why didn't Iran have a nuclear weapon? They've been trying. If they've been trying.
Then why
to
didn't
develop
Iran have
one
what?
since 2004. Why didn't they have a nuclear weapon? If Iran wanted,
Why
a
do you
nuclear
think
weapon,
they didn't have a nuclear weapon? Because we and the Israelis and perhaps other countries stopped them.
Could you imagine having to go through a gauntlet like that just for standing up for your conscience and saying no to Israel, saying no to regional domination, no to the Israeli superpower agenda, which is what they want? It's very interesting, this topic, and the Jews are generally a hermetic culture. They keep their opinions, their real opinions, among themselves. You'll find them in the Jeffrey Epstein emails, and that's how they really think. Okay, and I can promise you, Mark Levin is talking like that all the time in certain circles. Okay, he's the same mindset, dumb goy. I mean, I don't think it can be any better articulated than I did in the 1947 chapter of The Devil in Us, a memoir of you and me, where I make in great detail the case that Ashkenazi Zionism and National Socialism, the Nazis in Germany, when you study the policies and the beliefs of both groups, they're the same. They're two sides of the same coin. One is the master race and one is the chosen people. And neither option was ever a good option for the rest of the human race that doesn't feel that way. And there's nothing wrong with feeling that way. I think every race deep down thinks that they're the best. You see racial supremacy in every form of self-expression artistically. You see it in Spike Lee and his black art. You see it in white art. You see it in Chinese position on culture and history. They believe they're the center of the world and it all revolves around them. We're not as exposed to that. The Far East and the particularities of cultural chauvinism in the Far East aren't really understood in the West. But they're there in spades, man. Spades. Right? The Japanese. I'm not saying the Jews are the only people who've ever behaved this way, gotten it into their head that they had the right to treat other people like slaves and garbage and less than human, and certainly less than them. But what I am saying is they seem to be the world heavyweight champions at it right now in 2026. And it's not a good look coming off the Holocaust. If the emotional collateral of the Holocaust, which has been brilliantly invested by the psychic investors in Judea, and investing is more than just material. If you don't think there's any such thing as psychic investing, you're crazy. You haven't been paying attention to what goes on in this world. Propaganda is a form of psychic investment. You're propagating a mindset which will exist in large measure in 5-10 years, depending on the propaganda program. Okay, it's just literally that simple now. People are literally that gone now. And I don't know if it's the blue light technology that Dr. Jack Kruse talks about. I'm sure that's a portion of it. I think a lot of it's just moral cowardice. It never ceases to amaze me that people will contemplate sacrificing their own life in the service of their country. They'll join the military. They'll go fight. They'll get perhaps maimed or killed. They're willing to wager that. They're willing to wager their own life to let the world know this is how much this means to me. But it's a bit of a ruse. It's a bit of a trope. It's not quite as true as we want it to be. Because if it were true, if the human being had that noble disposition, we'd see way more people standing up now and making sacrifices, even if the sacrifice was just their retirement plans, their work. You know, I might lose my job if I say this. Well, we might lose the world if you don't. Have you thought about that? So everything we live within now is just a giant propaganda matrix. And Trump doesn't seem to be doing anything. It seems to me to be a perfectly captured White House. Because when these media spats emerge between former MAGA alignments, a unified MAGA movement, Trump always favors the Zionist position in who he supports in his tweets. He favors Mark Levin. It's very dangerous now, you know. He's surrounded by these nut jobs, these Israeli nut jobs, and they're religious fanatics. As I told you, I mean, Chabad Lubavitch is probably the magical ancestry of Sabbatean Frankism, which would be all the really dark stuff, right? Sitting on a lot of curse energy, those people. That's why you dress in black like that. It's to contain all that energy. You're a discharge point for that energy. Anyways, that's about all that I have for today. It's nice to get back to podcasting, and hopefully we'll see you again tomorrow. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.